Coming up today on The Story.
Princess Diana, I've got an exclusive of her. She was visiting a children's home in Sydney, and as Princess Diana came out into the sandpit with the children, a little girl put her arms up, and Princess Diana picked her up and put her on her shoulder. They've now got a poster-sized copy of that photo.
The Story.
G'day, I'm Jimmy Colefax. Welcome to The Story. Well, once again, award-winning Christian photographer Ramon Williams is with us to share more about his amazing life journey. He's photographed everyone from Cliff Richards to Princess Diana and has taken photos at historically significant events like the 1968 Billy Graham Crusade and Cyclone Tracy in Darwin in 1974. Once again, Ramon joins us via the telephone from his home in Sydney and is having a chat with Eric Scatterbo.
Ramon, welcome back to the program.
Thank you, Eric. Appreciate being here.
Glad to have you on once again. And last time we were hearing your life story, how you gave up all your photography equipment to serve the Lord more. But then, as we heard, the Lord worked in your life and kind of brought photography back into it as you then went to the Billy Graham Crusade in 1968 and took some photos.
When I was challenged to take it back up again, I seemed to say to the Lord, look, this had been a God that I gave up for you. And the response seemed to be, no, it was a rod like Moses. I asked you to lay it down. Now I'm asking you to pick it up and use it, and I'm going to bless it. And certainly the Lord has. There have been many things that have happened since then that I can see the Lord's hand in it all.
Isn't that interesting how God can sometimes have us give up something that we really, really like, and maybe it's becoming a God to us, but maybe just for a season, for you to get some maturity and some growth, and then at another point, he'll introduce it back into your life. Is that kind of what happened?
That's very true. I'd say one of the most outstanding examples of this was Cyclone Tracy. Happened Christmas Day, 1974. My wife's brother was in charge of the Retta Dixon home in Darwin. We had one of his daughters with us for Christmas. And she came in saying, Uncle Ray, I can't phone Dad. Can't find out what's happening up there. Something about a cyclone. So I tried phoning and couldn't get through. And eventually the story was coming through in the media. Cyclone Tracy had hit Darwin on December 25, 1974. So Boxing Day, I phoned around the religious media, which had been formed that year. And look, is it all right if I go to Darwin and say I represent the religious media and let's find out what's happened to the churches and the children's homes and things? And, oh, yeah, go right ahead. So I found the Air Force. I found the RAF headquarters out at Richmond Air Base and said, any way of getting into Darwin, religious media, want to photograph and report it? They said, oh, yes, we've got a Hercules tomorrow morning, 6 o'clock at the airport. Come on out, and by the way, your clothing, your food, everything has to fit in your camera case because we don't have room on the plane.
Oh, wow.
I picked the biggest camera case I could find.
Smart.
Loaded that up with bottles of water and my gear and cameras around the neck. Got out there, got up to Darwin, and walked in on the brother-in-law. He's more or less in shock. I stayed with them. And he loaned me a car that I could go around and find out what had happened to all the churches. That was as soon as I got there. And then after I'd phoned through to 2CH in Sydney, a radio station, I gave a report on what had happened to every church in Darwin, which they used on the Sunday. Also, a lady from our church, Betty, she was with Red Cross. And so I went looking for Betty and found Betty and the Red Cross activities and so on taking place. So, who's photographing your work? She said, well, no one. So I said, look, is it okay if I spend the day with you folk and photograph what Red Cross is doing? Today, they are the only photos the Red Cross have of their activities following Cyclone Tracy.
Wow.
The camera case itself, by the way, is in the National Museum in Canberra, and
is that
they're
right?
going to use that in a big project on Cyclone Tracy.
Well, I mean, a lot of times these events happen, but nobody thinks, oh, we should probably record them for historical purposes. But you did that.
That's what it's all about.
Mm-hmm.
And other cyclones followed after that, but nothing like Cyclone Tracy. There was a twin cyclone, two cyclones hit Fiji, 1985, I think it was. And a news journalist in 2CH in Sydney, Len London, some folk may remember that name, he saw me in the street in Sydney and said, well, you're religious media, are you covering the cyclone in Fiji? I said, well, I hadn't thought of that. So I went up to Fiji, stayed in a motel, and made contact with church leaders up there and found out what had happened to all their churches. And then followed Solomon Islands. Solomon Islands, I nearly fell out the back of a plane.
Oh, wow. What happened?
The Air Force took me up in Carabao, and they were dropping out all these relief supplies out the back. I was standing in the middle of the plane, photographing everything going out, and suddenly the pilot decided to climb, but he hadn't told me, and I was the only one not strapped in. I nearly went out the back of the plane.
You almost went out with the supplies.
I grabbed the side very smartly, believe me. Then there was Vanuatu and Cyclone Larry up in North Queensland. I went up there and photographed what happened to all the churches there.
Wow, I think I'm really impressed that good photos don't come to you. You have to find them. I mean, you have to be on your front foot and looking for innovative ways to take these photos and be in the right place at the right time. Is that kind of the key to it? You've got to be sensitive to what's happening around you, even with the minor details. One outstanding photo that I have, Cyclone Tracy, as I came to the airport to leave the place, there was a Salvation Army commissioner, Margaret Warren, at the airport, and she was consoling a crying baby in her arms. A young fellow, could have been about 12 months, I suppose, something like that. And he was crying his eyes out, and here she is saying, it's all right, it's all right. It's a beautiful photo. Because, I mean, nobody gave you a job description and trained you in this. You pretty much made this position up as you were going, it sounds like. I put it out to the Lord. I blame him for it all. Because who would have thought of a religious photographer doing tragedies or cyclones? Yeah, exactly. And, of course, there was the big national gathering in Canberra in 1988. 40,000 Christians surrounded Parliament House, a new Parliament House. And Bob Hawke, the Prime Minister, had said, no, we're not going to have any prayers for the opening of Parliament House. And 40,000 Christians said, that's what you think. They came along 2 days ahead of the official opening and surrounded the place and prayed for it, prayed for the leaders, prayed for policies that'll be attended there. And Aboriginal folk led some of the worship services. And Mel Garvin was there, coordinating things with Fusion and Awakening. At that time, I was the USA Radio Network Australian correspondent. So I'd phone reports back to America, which they used on their radio network. But I was only given 25 seconds. So I went back to the motel. I reported 40,000 surrounding Parliament House, prayer meetings taking place. It's going to be on all night, etc. We can't use that. I said, why? I said, you went 27 seconds. So we'll phone you again in 10 minutes and you can do it again. So I did that. Mel Garvin had more media feedback from America than he had from Australia. In 1988, the media weren't working in Canberra on the weekend. There was only one camera crew there, whereas my report went to every state in America. And there were Australians over there who heard it, and they reported, contacted Mel Garvin and said what a great project the whole thing was. Now, one of the great things about media, when it's done right, is that the Lord can be doing something, working in someone's life or in society, but a lot of people won't know about it other than the people who are involved. But the great thing is people like you and your photography and also getting the stories out that you can kind of shine a spotlight on how God is working in people's lives.
That's the whole aim of the work, helping others, telling others what others are doing for the Lord. That's my motto. And there's quite a lot that people don't know about.
Yeah.
And if they don't know, they can't support or encourage.
Right.
And so if I can get that support and encouragement for others in what they're doing for the Lord, it doesn't attract a lot of people to support my work, because you're not saving souls, you're not feeding children, you're not doing this, you're not doing that. You're helping others who should pay. How could you ask for anyone from Cyclone Tracy to pay for a coverage?
Exactly.
You can't.
Yeah.
No way.
You're listening to The Story. Today, award-winning Christian photographer Ramon Williams is once again sharing about his remarkable life journey. Next, we'll hear about some of the challenges that he and his wife have had living by faith and how the Lord has always provided for their needs. That and more when we return.
The Story.